Enix's Dragon Quest, released earlier that year. In 2003, Square and Enix merged into a single company, but throughout the 80s and 90s they were rivals, making similar games and vying for similar audiences. Final Fantasy was an ambitious project. Most video games throughout the 70s and 80s were developed by either very small teams or even a single programmer. Final Fantasy took a more collaborative approach, consisting of a large team with each member assigned to a specific task. Sakaguchi headed development, while artist Yoshitaka Amano designed the characters and provided concept art. The game's music was composed by Nobuo Uematsu, while an Iranian-American programmer named Nasir Kubeli handled coding. Kenji Terada, a freelance writer, was hired to flesh out the story and write dialogue. This specialized approach was bold and expensive, but it ensured that at each stage of development, Final Fantasy received the full attention of an expert in that particular field. The game had to be a success. If it failed, Square would fail. The working title was Fighting Fantasy, but to avoid copyright issues with a series of choose-your-own-adventure books by the same name, it was changed to Final Fantasy. Sakaguchi has gone on record saying he really wanted an alliterative title to make the game stand out, that anything abbreviated to FF would suffice. The enduring myth is that the name Final Fantasy was chosen to emphasize that this was Square's final chance to make the game, that if they failed, their fantasy of being a game company would come to an end. The story is apocryphal, and no one from Square has ever officially confirmed it. On the other hand, no one's officially denied it either. Final Fantasy released in Japan in December of 1987. It was a hit, selling 400,000 copies on the Famicom and an additional 200,000 on home computer. Square had hit on something big, and development of a sequel began almost immediately. While Square made a variety of games throughout the 80s and 90s, the Final Fantasy series was their bread and butter. Its ever-evolving combat system, sprawling open worlds, creative art design, narrative-driven gameplay, and tendency to push the graphical power of its hardware to the absolute limits made Final Fantasy the gold standard of Japanese role-playing games. Despite selling well in Japan, Square struggled to find a market in the West. Working closely with Nintendo, Square, as a third-party developer, was more or less at the mercy of their corporate overlords. Nintendo was notorious for the control it exerted over third-party developers, and since they believed there simply wasn't much of a market for JRPGs outside of Japan, they rarely took the steps necessary for localization. One of the causes of this was the very game Square created. Enix's Dragon Quest released in North America as Dragon Warrior in 1989, and Nintendo produced hundreds of thousands of copies, anticipating it to be the big seller of the 1989 Christmas season. It wasn't. By 1990, Nintendo had so many unsold copies they began giving them away for free to new subscribers of Nintendo Power. Burned by Dragon Warrior's underperformance, Nintendo was disinclined to put much effort into localizing additional JRPGs. The original Final Fantasy did receive a North American release in 1990, and even sold 100,000 copies more than it had in Japan. Nevertheless, Final Fantasy II did not receive a North American release, even though Square had begun localization effort. No localization was attempted at all for Final Fantasy III. Final Fantasy IV came to North America in 1991 for the Super Nintendo, but the localization suffered somewhat from Nintendo's restrictive censorship practices. Worse still, Final Fantasy IV was released in North America as Final Fantasy II. This inconsistent naming convention continued with Final Fantasy VI, released the cartridges lacked memory, which forced Square to make cuts to environments, graphics, and even text dialogue. So, in 1996, Square publicly announced that after 10 years of working with Nintendo, Final Fantasy VII would be released exclusively on the Sony PlayStation. Square's decision to jump ship was a risky one. Since the 1980s, the home video game market had been dominated by Nintendo, and to a lesser extent Sega. Many companies had tried, and failed, to release competing systems over the years. Aligning with Sony was by no means a sure bet, but Square knew it. At first glance, the PlayStation was a bit lacking compared to its rivals. At 32 bits, it had only half the processing power of the N64, and its RAM and graphical capabilities were noticeably less than those of the Sega Saturn. What it did have was format, versatility, and price. Like the Saturn, the PlayStation used compact discs rather than cartridges. This meant that games released on the PlayStation could have significantly more content and detail than those on the N64, despite the N64's superior hardware. The Saturn had this advantage too, but the PlayStation had another trick up its sleeve. The Saturn used an internal hard drive to save games, while on the N64 most games were saved onto the cartridge itself. The PlayStation used external memory cards, and since more memory cards were going to be purchased, there was essentially no limit to how many save files a PlayStation owner could have. This also meant that game data was transferable across multiple discs. For the PlayStation, games were no longer constrained by the limitations of a single piece of media. As with memory cards, the CD format meant there was, in essence, no limit to how big a PlayStation game could be. It could always be split across 4 discs. Many PS1 classics, like Metal Gear Solid and Resident Evil 2, took advantage of this, as did all 3 PlayStation-exclusive Final Fantasies. As for the console's price, well, at 1995's Electronic Entertainment Expo, Sega announced that the Saturn would retail for $399. Sony offered just 3 words in response. In addition to all this, the PlayStation had Sony's war chest at its disposal. To ensure their console would not be the same fate as the CDI or television, Sony launched an enormous marketing campaign, extolling the maturity of the PlayStation as a unique key toy by Sega and Nintendo. These ads are an absolute treasure trove of edgy 90s too. Excuse me, you are so totally whipped. Unbrand, let's ride a bicycle bill for 2. Then we can go to the Home store and then go buy sheet. Would you rather be at home shooting a bazooka or watching a chick fight? Chick fight, bazooka. Chick fight, bazooka.
What is it then?
Still, Sony was starting from scratch. Nintendo had Mario, Sega had Sonic. Both companies had established fan bases, willing to shell out hundreds of dollars just for the chance to play the next installment in their
If I had a scepter for every
If
case of
Sony
rock
wanted
joint or
to
whip
compete,
vein I've
it
killed
would
since
be
I
the
opened
killer
this,
app.
I'd be a rich woman
Final
indeed.
Fantasy VII was that app. Sony dumped an unprecedented $100 million into marketing it, and for the first time ever, a Final Fantasy title would be released in Europe. Sony's ads focused on the cinematic quality of the game,
I heard the
providing vague
gourmets
references
hiding
to
out
the
somewhere
story
in
and showing
Skyrim.
off the very impressive,
fella who...
for the time,
Here,
fully
look at
animated
this.
cinematics.
Some of the yardsmen came by and left this bounty with me.
Lies a story of ultimate conquest,
It's all in this
a
note.
story of war and friendship, a story of a love that can never
Need
be,
anything else? Just let me know.
and a hatred that always was. And now, the most anticipated epic adventure of the year will never come to a theater near you. Final Fantasy VII.
These commercials ran on primetime programs like The Simpsons, Conan O'Brien, and even Monday Night Football. In print, the game is promoted with massive, double-splash ads extolling the game's graphical intensity, with copy such as, "It's to a human what headlights are to a deer," and "You can actually hear your pupils dilate." One notorious ad took direct aim at Nintendo, reading, "Someone please give the guys who make cartridge games a cigarette and a blindfold." Sony was going all in on Final Fantasy VII. Now it was up to Square to deliver. By this point, Square had been making Final Fantasy games for a decade, and was releasing them at an almost yearly pace. While there was some variation in quality, the games were reliable sellers and often garnered critical praise. Most of the games followed a similar formula. A ragtag group of heroes set out to save the world from some mystical evil power, and there was usually magic, crystals, and airships involved, plus a guy named Sid. The setting was medieval high fantasy, the graphics two-dimensional, the combat turn-based. Square had an established formula that produced reliable results, and few would begrudge them for doing more of the same. But Final Fantasy VII, due nearly all these conventions, threw them out the window. The first and most noticeable shift was in the graphics. Every game in the series up to that point had utilized a top-down, 2D perspective. The detail of the characters and environments had improved over the years, but the basic look of Final Fantasy remained the same. With 7, the game would use fully three-dimensional models, moving about a fully three-dimensional world. The blockiness of these models have turned into something of a running joke, and even for the time they were a bit crude compared to other 3D games. Nevertheless, the jump in graphical quality between Final Fantasy VI and Final Fantasy VII was nothing short of extraordinary. A misconception I had when first playing this game, and which persisted far longer than I cared to admit, was that the entire game used 3D computer graphics. In fact, one of the things that allowed Square to have 3D models in the first place was the use of pre-rendered backgrounds. With the exception of the overworld, nearly every environment in Final Fantasy VII is a static image, occasionally augmented with rudimentary animation effects. Beneath these static images are invisible pathways on which the player-controlled character models can move. The use of pre-rendered backgrounds allowed Square to create incredibly detailed environments without using up too much processing power. Pre-rendered backgrounds became a hallmark of the series, being utilized in Final Fantasy VIII, IX, and even X on the PlayStation 2. While often derided, games models have, to my mind at least, a certain level of emotive charm. Like silent film actors, they move with exaggerated expressiveness, shaking their fists when angry, conspicuously sweeping their hair when flirting. Every character has a unique way of walking and running, which informs their personality, and some of the most emotionally resonant scenes of the game occur when there is no dialogue at all, and the characters express themselves entirely in their movement. While the character models may have been somewhat underwhelming, pre-rendered cutscenes were not. Square gained a reputation in the late 90s for filling its games with pre-rendered cinematics, sometimes to an excessive degree. 1998's Parasite Eve, marketed as the cinematic RPG, had no fewer than 40 cutscenes, while Xenosaga had one that was over half an hour in length. This is nothing compared to Hideo Kojima at his worst, but still. Final Fantasy VII used cutscenes more sparingly, sprinkling them into typical plot moments. One which has been emulated time and again, the opening, where a field of stars fades away to reveal the face of a young woman, Erin. We follow her as she walks down an alley to an open street, and here the camera pulls back into a long, gloriously detailed shot that reveals the whole of Midgar, the futuristic cyberpunk city where the first 5 hours of the game take place. The music swells, the title card flashes, and the camera zooms in on an entirely different part of the city, seamlessly transitioning from cutscene to gameplay. It's impressive even today, and the remake replicates this sequence almost shot for shot. Granted, some of the details have not aged all that gracefully. Erin's eyes are flat images superimposed on her face. Note how her pupils don't move when she turns her head. Her body is made of disparate, solid shapes. You can see the gap between her legs and torso when she stands up. But remember, this was 1998, just 2 years after Toy Story. For something like this to run on a console was mind-blowing. For many gamers, these cinematics were what elevated Final Fantasy VII above other video games. Rather than a cartoonish kid's toy, the game looked and felt like a Hollywood movie, and this was entirely by design. Development was split between Square's offices in Tokyo and Los Angeles, with the LA team using the area's connection to the movie industry to bring in special effects experts. The game's budget was in excess of $40 million, and more than 200 individuals worked on it over a span of 2 years. It was, by far, the largest and most expensive video game ever made up to that point. Some have even called Final Fantasy VII the world's first AAA game. Whether that's a good thing or not is up to the viewer to decide. design. The game's budget is especially apparent in its battle screen, which is one of the reasons it managed to impress Western audiences in a degree previous JRPGs rarely had. The first Final Fantasy games, and most JRPGs up to that point, utilized battle screens that were rather static. The player characters lined up on one side, the enemies on the other, and the player issued a variety of commands to resolve the conflict. There had been battle animations in Final Fantasy since the beginning, but unless you knew what was going on, unless you had an understanding of what all those flashing numbers meant, they were not especially exciting to watch. They were not cinematic. That all changed in Final Fantasy VII. Now the battles took place in little 3D arenas modeled to look like the surrounding environment. In them, 3D models duped it out with fully animated movements, and a few palette-swapped enemies aside, the variety of enemies, environments, and animations on hand was incredible. Every one of the 9 playable characters has a completely unique moveset for everything, basic attacks, the casting of spells, the issuing of limit breaks, the game's ultimate attacks. And since these battles took place in 3D environments, the camera could move with smooth, changing angle and position to emphasize the drama of the combat. For the first time in series history, battles looked exciting. So,
you are. Better die!
Last episode, and now my head is pounding worse than this guy's drum here. So I think I'm going to head out, start my day, because we need to earn some coin and make back the coin we flushed away on drink last episode. Oh my god, what have we done? So yes, my friends, welcome to the next episode of A Normal Life in Skyrim. In the last episode, I threw out the idea of possibly doing some less than honest work with the ne'er-do-wells that happen. Sell your skins. Perhaps I can be a hunter. Well, I'll do anything to distract me. Any odd job will do. Last time I was not bitten by the capture rock. Come on then. Oh no, I missed. Oh no. I'm a new alpha. Someone give me the alpha. Allow me first to collect my arrows back, please. Disable that. I will deal with you presently with my arrows.
new life. Who are you, good sir? You looking for me? Surely not. Gave me nothing. Dragon. Yes, I saw it too. I too saw dragon. All but me, I will not. I saw it too. My home burnt to ash. Right, I need to get inside the inn for now. Get out of this godforsaken storm. Once the day clears up, come out and start working. Let's get inside, let's read this journal. Oh, yes. Perhaps I will have an ale for now. I require a new place to sit and a warm fire. Here we are, my friends, we've arrived in Riftwood to start a new life, having deserted from the Imperial Legion. Here we are, that's a rub my hand, headed my friend, rub my hand, your soul, spirit, new life begins, my friend. Just not like reading the journal. It is me. In execution, Ulfric Stormcloak was to be beheaded. What the heroes had Ulfric Stormcloak? Maybe this is a good moment for me. Also able to my escape from the Legioners. Just having a Helgen, they were not looking for one measly Imperial scout. Ulfric Stormcloak has escaped. Brilliant, this works for us yet again. Although, it would be nice if my home wasn't completely burnt down. Right, I have no coin to spend here, right? I need to get outside. There's a free woodcutter's axe by the mill. Let's go grab that and start woodcutting now. Oh, okay, the storm's passed on. That's helpful. That's very nice indeed. Okay, nice. I'm down to work through the rain, bitter rain. Well done, this stuff. For now, it's honest work for me, so I can scrape enough coin to buy myself some gear. I want to get myself a backpack and a tent, and some supplies, a war skin, that kind of stuff. Because I have no home right now. I am homeless. I'm kind of a drifter, if anything. And so I might lay a tent down by the edge of town, station woodcut and stuff. That would start my normal life. And yeah, we don't have a home here. Woodwork, we've got a decent amount of sections to scrape together, so yeah, honest work for us by the looks of it, my friends. Ourselves, cutter's axe, honest labour and honest work. Thank you. Yes, that is exactly what I'm looking for. I'm looking for work indeed. Brilliant. Goodbye, bow for now. I'll only use you when I go hunting. Hello, woodcutter's axe. There we go. Look at that. Yes. The lumberjack wife begins today, my friends. It's very nice. Right then. Thomas, you're looking for work, my friend. Look there. I too got this here in Riverwood. Okay, so I think I just cut some wood and it be done. And there we are. Hopefully it's a fair price. I'm sure there are plenty of folks out here willing to chop wood. We won't get a fair price, but well, there's a fisherman here as well. We could sell fish to him. And there is a fishing hole down that way. Got ourselves a free rod. Right, let's begin cutting some wood first, shall we? Maybe we'll end the end with some nice fishing, my friends. Yes. Ah, yes, this is a simple life. That's what we want. We need 2 firewood chop. Very nice. I could change those values. I have got a mod that allows me to change woodcut values, but I want to keep this kind of realistic. I don't want to get rich quick, so I think this is fair. Keeps it naturally, keeps woodcutting naturally low, I guess. As it is a very basic job, menial work. There's nothing like it. This is what it is. Like blending my sword by my side as well. Doing the animal's attack. Settlement. Let's sell this on this last time. Let's see how much we can get per wood. This might not be good work for us. As long as we can afford the supplies we need. Perhaps I should go back and feed skin those. See if it's got more skin out of it. It's not. It's very hard to pay actually. You know, gross pay, but you need a bunch of stuff. A lot of it. It's got a travel cloak as well. All this stuff we're going to make ourselves. For now, we'll get water from the inn. It's fine. It's great. I'm pretending that has some stuff I want anyway. I need to pack that. Go to the inn now, I think. Actually, I'll double check what supplies I need to make a tent. Oh, yes. This is fine. After the escape of the storm, such a pleasant sight. Right, what do we need then? Make a tent. Do I even have the skills to do it? Let's make a sheet of leather. Okay. 12 leather and 8 leather strips. I say we go skin those wolves. I think we do that, my friends, because that will provide us with plenty of leather. Right, I don't think we need the claimers else. There's a lot of leather. These kind of characters that live in the land, farming, those characters, they're very based on the denounces. Start is always a big grind for leather. So once we get a few pelts to our name, we're coming with more leather from sometimes. Yes, the course is still there. We've got a lot of foraging as well. I'm doing every odd job as this character. I'm not going to stick to one profession, and I'm going to drift and do what needs to be done. There might be jobs to get in for us, so these, yes. I need to sell these to the character comes to that. We've got an offer as well. So all these interesting jobs, we can actually catch them with our hand, really make a product first, let us deal with the rest of these guys. Skin job health. I wonder if we can sell ingredients at the inn. Maybe the general store. I mean, an apothecary would probably buy them, there is one in town, so I'll grab the meat as well. That'll sell something. Yeah, we get a meaty one piece. Just running a play there. Right, we've got 3 more carcasses to can I come as Arrow, please? Oh, no, I can't. Shame. Arrow's going to be a great value to us, for sure. There's this guy, this geezer. Skinning away. Taking all the else I need, I will take with me. Let's get back to that, shall we? These are all going to be probably. Oh no, yeah, we're in one yet. We can get ourselves a hunting knife. One day, my friends, find myself some land and retire. It's going to be hard living for us without any of the certainty to wire a man, I think. Yes. Maybe a good quality powerful ones. It's like grooming. So when they're poor ruins, they don't give us great returns on leather, sadly. But I guess this is another thing here, so we'll just keep it. I don't know. Even if it costs us more, we can help more than we can eat. A large animal, but yeah. I'm going to be moving this guy. He's a meat. 5, yes, brilliant. This is really good stuff. One of the alpha. The alpha must give us a good meat, surely. I think so, anyway. Put another out to our name. That's okay. I'll find again. That was out for the underlings. The rest of the characters.
Speak quickly. Hmm?
Sorry, but I need you. Your meats of skin feed me, clothe me. Sorry. I can't forget. try and drop these stones, shall we? I don't want to coal right now. There we are, already and that does not look friendly. Let's find out Ed. The person does not look like a friendly soul.